together with so many people who really are so committed to the values that we have in our faith, and that we can be comfortable being political with our faith. I think that's a big step, is to realize we can be political. It's okay to be political with your passion for living out the values of our faith. And again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for giving me a chance to share a little bit of what I have come up with after spending a third of my adult life living out of a 9 by 22 by 14-inch carry-on-the-airplane-sized suitcase, okay? I love to hang out with people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given, and I just love my travels. But you know, I think the most beautiful day of all my trips is the day when I come home, and I realize how richly blessed we are to call this corner of our planet home. What a beautiful place. Think about the nature, how abundant our lifestyles are, the stability we have, the democracy we have, and our communities. And you know, you just appreciate that. And then as people of faith, I think we kind of got to remember the other side of that equation. The final kind of thought is that comes with stewardship. We have a responsibility. We are so richly blessed. I think if we're honest with our faith, we take that stewardship seriously. Now, Europe is my beat. For me, that's the wading pool of world exploration. And I love to challenge Americans to get out of their comfort zone and gain a different perspective. And I've enjoyed just wonderful perspective in my travels in Europe and beyond. And one thing I think a lot about when I travel is people's passion for community. This is community here. We're here because we care about our community in so many different ways. And the way Europe has a passion for community challenges me and it charms me. And I think when we travel, we can learn from how other people take their community. One of my favorite things about European travel is the passeggiata, or the paseo. You know, in the magic hour in the evening after a long day of work before the sun goes down, everybody's out strolling. You're just out strolling with many different generations. Everybody's there. My TV producer, Simon, says if I had my way, I would feature a paseo in every TV show we do. Ireland, Norway, Portugal, we do a paseo. I just think that's a great part of the whole scene. You know, in Salamanca in Spain, it's got the greatest square in Europe, in Spain anyways, and everybody's out, and there's a tradition where the men will just kind of circulate counterclockwise, and the women will circulate clockwise, and everybody gets to say, hello, good evening, checking it out. And I just love being there in that scene. The older women who are no longer comfortable making the scene that way, they're up in the window looking down, disgusted at how trashy the girls are dressing this year. And it's just one big, everybody is out. And I just love that. Then I come home to Edmonds, and I want to go take a walk in the evening. And I walk down the streets, and they are empty of people. And I get a sense that mothers are grabbing their children and taking them behind the fence. There's a man on the street, you know? And it's just, we don't have that free-for-all in the streets here, and I just miss that, and it's part of community in Europe. Another thing about Europe is their passion for markets. Up in Edmonds, we have a market every Saturday in the summer. Well, in most of Europe, they have markets every day of the week, and in most of Europe, people don't strive to have a freezer in their garage, so they only have to go shopping every 2 weeks. They insist on having a small refrigerator under the sink, so they have to go shopping every morning. That's called connecting with your community. And these Europeans, they will willingly pay too much for their loaf of bread to buy it from the person who baked it. It makes no sense economically. It would never float, you know, in a lot of our sort of perspectives. But in Europe, that's part of family values. And I really love that. Also, when you travel, you realize that an integral part of the fabric of community is how people take care of their neighbors in every stage of their life. And I think the measure of the caliber of a community is how they take care of their young people and their seniors. And when I'm traveling, I find communities all over the world that work really hard to take care of their seniors, to keep them involved. In Slovenia, I was just in Slovenia recently, and as in many countries, you have the seniors living at home, and there's 3 generations in a typical household. And my friends in Slovenia told me, we like to have grandma and grandpa nearby, but not too nearby. We have a little slogan that says, it's nice to be close to grandma and grandpa, but so that they have to visit with shoes on rather than slippers. So there's community there in a fun little way. The European communities also work to keep their seniors involved and sort of engaged and stimulated. During the darkest part of the big recession in Europe a few years ago, I have friends in Spain who are tour guides, and they're telling me there's absolutely no business for a tour guide in Spain right now, except for one thing. It's the only thing that keeps us at all employed. The government is continuing its program of giving the seniors free tours, hiring the guides, because they want to get those seniors out in the streets. I love that. When I go to Rome, one of my favorite restaurants is called Trattoria Gino. It's been called Trattoria Gino for a long, long time, and now Gino is barely able to shuffle around and shave the Parmesan on people's pasta. But he's still there. It's still Gino's Cafeteria or Gino's Trattoria, and I just love that. Now, communities have to deal with diversity, and I see that here, and I see that abroad. And I find that the people who are the most challenged with diversity are the people who don't get out very much, you know. And when you get out very much, you realize diversity is something not to be threatened by, but it's something to celebrate when we do it right. A very fun part of my work is taking tours around Turkey. And I love to go with my tour bus in Turkey with my Turkish guide, 25 Americans, and go to villages that have never seen another American in the flesh. We come to this village, and when we come to a village like that, it's big news. And we park the bus in the square, and generally the mayor will come out in many cases, and we've had the mayor invite us into his home. And when you go into any home in Turkey, according to their religion, of course, a visitor is a gift from God, right? And you go into the mayor's house, and they have the music, and everybody's dancing, like in Turkey, you know, this kind of stuff. So we're all dancing, and I'm the big shot among the Americans, because I'm the tour guide, and the mayor's the big shot there. So he dances over to me, and he says, Mr. Tour Guide, come with me. I want to show you the most important part of my house. This is the wall where I hang my Quran bag. And in my Quran bag, I also keep a copy of the Torah and a copy of the Bible. Because as far as I'm concerned, we're all people of the book, children of the same God, the three great monotheistic religions. I love that. And that's the kind of inspiration and challenge you can get, I think, when you travel. Now, when we travel, we see our country and other societies grappling with the same problems. I mean, think of the problems we've got: healthcare, the challenges we've got, immigration, labor, climate change, debt, changing demographics, an aging society. How are you going to afford the services for seniors? All these, with the challenge of an economic crisis, a so-called economic crisis. Well, we're not the only people with these challenges. When we travel, we see how different societies deal with the same problems. I love it. We can learn from other people's experiences. We can share notes. Now, the United States tends to deal with these challenges as a rugged individualist society, you know. And in Europe, I find that people are dealing with it more as a family, more as a community. I talk to my European friends about their challenges and how do they solve it. It seems like for a lot of Americans, there's two options. You can have big bad government or little good government. In Europe, there's a third option. It's called big good government. Now, my European friends, they pay a lot of taxes. And I love to go over there. I'll tell you one thing, I'm so glad I'm running my business here in the United States. I would be frustrated as can be running my business in Europe. I'm not going to embrace everything they do, hook, line, and sinker, but I'm open and I love talking with them. And I've got these sounding boards all over Europe, and I've got a friend named Ollie. You might have seen him in my TV show. He's the only school teacher in a humble little village high in the Swiss Alps where everybody has the same last name. And I sit down and I talk with Ollie and I say, Ollie, how can you Swiss people so docilely pay such high taxes? And without missing a beat, he says, well, what's it worth to live in a society where there's no hunger, no homelessness, and where everybody, regardless of the wealth of their parents, has access to quality health care and education? He's no liberal, he's no crusader. He's considered a pretty hardcore, you know, rough kind of guy as far as practicality goes, but that's just a European ethic, that you have enough influence in your society to raise the safety net a little bit, to take care of the people who just aren't that good at the scramble of capitalism, right? Now, in the United States, we solve these problems by what some people call 1,000 points of light. Let caring people like this take care of it, you know? That's charity. I'm so glad we're into advocacy. We're taking this to the government. That's what we're going to do. In Europe, they don't have a concept of a charity breakfast or a dinner like this. They just pay high taxes and they have high expectations and they have a good value for those taxes by their estimate. You know, I spend a lot of time going around the country on pledge drives. Yesterday I was in South Carolina giving a talk for a TV station. And in Europe, they don't have pledge drives. They've got non-commercial television and you plug a TV and you plug in a tax, all right? Now, I'm not saying what's right and what's wrong, but I'm saying it is thought-provoking to think that a society can work together to sort of weave the fabric of that community together a little stronger. And that's what we're doing here with Faith Action Network. It's interesting when I study Europe and the United States because we're kind of sister societies. We're basically, you know, affluent, mostly Christian, well-educated, passionate about our freedom, government by, for, and of the people. We're government by, for, and of the people. They're government by, for, and of the people. But if I look at it, there's a difference. Why are those Europeans so different than us in some ways? I think it's because here in the United States, we're enthusiastic about government by, for, and of the people via the corporations that we own. In Europe, it's government by, for, and of the people in spite of the corporations that they own. Now, it makes sense from an American point of view to have a government that keeps us safe and creates a good environment for our corporations to prosper. All right? That makes sense. That's our passion. And you got to remember, in the last generations, we've had a fundamental change in how we have our business sort of environment. In our corporations, the people who run our corporations have a legal obligation to the stockholders to profit maximize in the short term. This is an amazing change in our society, and I think it is a serious problem that a lot of us don't recognize. But we have to profit maximize in the short term as a responsibility to our stockholders, taking advantage of an accounting system that doesn't honestly account for the costs to our society. Somebody else has to pick up the slack, and that's our problem. My friend David Beckman runs Bread for the World. He's the president of Bread for the World, which is the national version of Faith Action Network that does the same work in Olympia. And David's working with Bread for the World in Washington, D.C. David told me that 20 years ago he had a lot of publicly held corporations supporting Bread for the World. And what he's noticed in the last couple of decades is now he does not have the publicly held corporations supporting him. His biggest corporate support is now privately held corporations. Don't let anybody tell you corporations have ethics other than profit maximizing in the short term. In Europe, they have corporations that are plenty profitable, but the government goes to bat for things that do not show up on the corporate bottom line in the short term. The government comes in and gets involved when it comes to sustainability, the future, the environment, paying for these things that have to be paid for sooner or later. They're going to lay it on the corporation rather than people down the road. You're more likely to see a law in Europe that requires you to pay for the disposal of your car when you buy it, because how else is it going to be covered? Now, that wouldn't float in America because it's not good for business. So these are the dynamics that we're dealing with. In much of Europe, when you have a child, you get 16 months of parental paid leave to be taken by the mother or the father if use it or lose it. That's not good for business. That's good for family values. That's good for a community. And an enlightened society knows that that's actually good for business in something more distant than the quarterly profit statement. So these are exciting challenges for us here when we make Faith Action Network strong with our support. Of course, the United States aspires for community, but we have this ethic, almost a religion of individualism in the free market. I love the free market, but it needs to be regulated a little bit, or when it gets out of hand, you've got a situation where if my cat has more buying power than your child, my cat gets the tuna. And I think there's a limit to how much of that should be allowed, even if it is in the name of free enterprise. You take that child and you put him in the poor part of town or south of the border, and you get a pretty grotesque gap between the haves and the have-nots. Consider the discussion in our society right now about healthcare, social security, schools, and consider privatization. I was trying to think of this, and I came up with this weird metaphor just a couple nights ago. A Venus flytrap with an endless appetite, very aggressive, which functions kind of as privatization. And if there's any public wealth floating around, it's free game. If people have their own retirement accounts, it's free game. Let's privatize it. If people have public education, let's privatize it. If people have affordable health care, let's privatize it. That's the Venus flytrap of the free enterprise system unbridled. When you think about our economic crisis, have you heard of our economic crisis? Who gets to name these things? And why do we just so docilely accept that framing of this issue? We're in an economic crisis right now. Half of humanity is trying to live on $2 a day. That's an economic crisis. We are filthy rich on a global scale. 90% of humanity wishes they had the economic crisis of Europe and America right now. And throughout this crisis, our already amazingly successful economy has been growing every year. We're not getting smaller, we're getting richer. If there's a crisis, it's a crisis of distribution within that very successful system. Personal problems if they're out of work or if their company went out. That is a crisis. But as a society, we are very successful. And for us to have a false austerity put on us so we can strip out all the elegance and decency in our communities because of a false crisis, we need to raise our voices. And that's why I'm so thankful and proud to be right here, standing with all of these caring people. This is so exciting that we can empower Faith Action Network. Now, when we have these budget struggles, and I know that our legislators who get this are really frustrated by this, people say there's not enough money. They say there's not enough money. We don't have the services I had when I was a kid right now in so many ways. There's enough money. There's more money than ever. There's just different priorities. Let's stop saying not enough money. Let's say different priorities, and let's work on the priorities. I like travel because it lets me look at our country from a distance. You can stay here all your life and not see things you'd see when you looked at the United States from south of the border. It's very exciting. You see things in high contrast. Also, when you go south of the border, you see where our country's heading if we don't get it together. Boy, I don't care even if you're motivated only by greed. If all you care about is national security and greed for your loved ones, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's not a pretty picture. Even if you can afford those designer fortifications, you don't want to keep your kids living behind them. I've seen it. I've been down in countries where any middle-class neighborhood has to pool its resources so they can hire an armed guard so their kids can go to the park safely. I've been in countries where in front of every pharmacy, every hotel, and every bank, there's an armed guard. And I'm starting to see armed guards here in America. We're creeping into that hellish situation when you've got an unbridled gap between rich and poor, and we're not even paying attention as a society. Thank goodness people of faith are speaking out, because we owe it to our democracy, if we care about it, to educate our neighbors about this. I've been down in Central America where anybody who has a fancy house has speed bumps in front of their house. I was dozing off on the bus. When you hit speed bumps, you wake up in San Salvador, you look over there and you see a rich person's mansion. So angry poor people have to slow down before they throw explosives into the yard so the guards can take down the license plate. You don't want to live in a world like that. That's not far-fetched. That's the reality, and a lot of our decision makers go down there and they don't get shown that dimension of it. Faith Action Network. What a beautiful concept. People of faith, motivated by their faith, taking action and working together as a network for the betterment of our community. Now, what I like about Faith Action Network is advocacy. Charity's nice. And for a lot of people, that's all they can get their brains around is charity. Let's fund a poor kid. It costs $20 a month and I got her picture on my mantle. I feel good now. That's beginner stuff, all right? Advocacy deals with structural poverty. That's what I love about our work here. We are lobbying against structural poverty in the halls of our legislature. Bread for the World does that for the country. Faith Action Network does that for our beautiful state. We have representative democracy, don't we? One person, one vote. Used to be that way. Money has a vote now, doesn't it? And it may be one person, one vote, but there's different volumes. And with money, you get to turn up the volume and you get to be heard. It's appalling to see what's going on with our democracy because of that. Faith Action Network, through our support, is turning up the volume on voices that don't get heard otherwise. It gets political with our values. Thank you. I don't like to consider this kind of work a charity. This kind of work is a service. I want this job done, and I don't know how to do it. And frankly, reading all those papers that the Faith Action Network people have to read makes my eyes glaze over. But I am thrilled to empower them to sort through all that tedium and go down there and speak up for people who don't have a voice. That's not a charity, that's a service. Together, we are empowering this service to do our job. So Faith Action Network's goal is to build a movement of faith communities to give a political voice to the voiceless. It's creating two networks, a network of 86 different faith communities, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and others, and it's a network of over 5,000 individual members who are organized in 49 different legislative districts to advocate, to lobby with elected officials. In the spirit of the interfaith, beautiful interfaith mission of Faith Action Network, I'd like to say a prayer as a dervish. You know the whirling dervishes? These guys that spin and they're kind of cruise ship entertainment. There's a lot more to it than that. A dervish is and for our Muslim friends here, please straighten me out afterwards. I want to learn more about this. I'm fascinated, but I'll do my very best here. A dervish is the Muslim equivalent of a monk, and they follow the prophet Mevlana or Rumi. And Mevlana is kind of the Muslim equivalent of St. Francis, the prophet of love. Easy to get your brain around him. Everybody's got to like him, right? A dervish prays 5 times a day, getting into a meditative trance by whirling, thinking about the teaching of his prophet about love. He plants one foot in his community, his home, and his other foot goes around the world, acknowledging the beautiful diversity on God's great creation. He raises one hand up to God to accept the love of his maker. The other hand, like the spout of a tea kettle, goes down and showers God's love on his great creation as he whirls, one foot in his home with his loved ones, the other one celebrating the diversity in his community. And he becomes a conduit of God's love. Whirling there, he finds a way to take God's love and implement it as a leader in his community. Now, if we're going to take a dervish prayer as members of FAN, we're going to go like this, and we're going to be thankful that God cares about our community. We're going to be thankful about what FAN has done for immigration reform, for gun violence, for human trafficking, for dealing with the gap between rich and poor, the grotesque gap considering how much wealth there is in our communities. We're going to lose ourselves in that beautiful idea, and then we're going to become tools of God, a conduit of God, taking God's love and putting it into action. For me, that is just really what this organization is all about. And that's why I'm so thankful to be here, encouraging you to really find a way to make Faith Action Network strong. In my own little way, I've tried to contribute. I've got some of my books over there. I wrote a book called Travel as a Political Act. And this is what I've written after 30 years of hanging out with people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given, getting out of my comfort zone, traveling in a post-9/11 desire to gain an empathy for the other 96% of humanity, to come home with a mindset where I'm more likely to build bridges and less likely to build walls. That's taking home a broader perspective, the most precious souvenir, and then implementing that here in this beautiful society of ours. That's making travel a political act. There's about 50 left over there. They're just $10 each. I just gave them to FAN, so every penny's going to go to FAN. If we sell them all tonight, that's another $1,000 for the work of FAN. I hope that you can pick those up. Thank you. Also, I have a tradition where I just like to donate, as a businessman, $10,000 a year to this get-together as a challenge to match the first $10,000 that's generated as this fundraiser. I had lunch with Reverend Paul Benz about a month ago, and it's a very expensive thing when you have lunch with Paul. So we decided it would be best if I doubled that gift. So we're going to make it $20,000. We're going to raise that much money, sort of a starting point of $40,000 to empower these good people to carry on with the successes they've had in the last year. Thank you for that round of applause, but really, there is nothing generous about that in my mind. This is what I consider enlightened consumption. Now let me explain that, because this is a little bit wacky, but I've got this personal thing called my vicarious consumption theory, okay? So if you like graphs, here's how it goes. We live our lives with a graph, and the more we consume, we need to spend money to live comfortably. The first dollar you spend is the most helpful. You need food, you need shoes, you need a roof over your head, you need health care, you need education, you need a car. After a while it starts to flatten out, doesn't it? And the $1,000 spent here brings you less joy and health than the $1,000 you spend here, right? Now, all of us are at a different stage on this curve, aren't we? I'm at a stage right now, because I'm thoughtful, and you are too, where I know if I consume another $1,000, it brings me no more joy. It really doesn't. I'm perfectly happy, and I can be conned into thinking I'll get happier by our system, but I like to be subversive, don't you? And to see that further consumption doesn't make me happy. Now, I have a selfish way to consume that money when it will bring me no more joy by vicariously enjoying the joy it will bring people when it's dedicated to their needs when they're steep on the curve. Now, everybody here is somewhere on that curve. It's fun to think about. And you may be here, you may be here, you may be here. But I bet everybody here is higher on the curve than the people we're helping when we empower Faith Action Network. Do you get it? I hope that you do. So this is a celebration. Because of our work today, Faith Action Network is going to take our values as people of faith to Olympia, and together we're going to empower this organization to really change this world in a beautiful way. Thank you very much for your help.